before being approached by an organization called Equal Ground. This was an organization, black-led voting rights organization, founded by Jasmine Burney Clark, who is an alum of Bethune-Cookman. She's a
Yes.
Wildcat, and came on board with Equal Ground as the Volusia County organizer. Then we created the position of political director.
Okay.
And then in that, we took on more of a role in the advocacy space. And then last year, Jasmine was tapped with the opportunity to lead a presidential campaign here in the state of Florida. And she asked me to serve as an interim executive director, and then upon her return, asked me to stay on as a permanent executive director. So that's sort of a brief recap of my journey. I know we're not here to necessarily hear all about my bio and talk about the work, but that is sort of what has brought me to this moment.
But it
Yes,
is
sir.
important, and let me just share this with you. It's important in terms of the bigger picture that you're working on,
Yes.
but it's also important for our listeners.
Yes, sir.
I too was a political science major, but a lot of young people may not understand what you can do with a political science
Oh, yeah.
major, and so that it is important for them to show that how you took on that assignment and how you were able to now leverage it into something that is truly impactful
Yes.
beyond just yourself, impacting this community, this country. Let's talk about some of the crazy, I won't call them all crazy, some of the developments,
Right.
should I call it, going on here in the state of Florida. We have a lot of activities. We have a lot of, it's I consider myself to be a wordsmith, but sometimes I run out of words to talk about the political activities that we are seeing happening at the federal level, and of course at the state level. And anytime, if we think that we got stuff going on crazy at the federal level, it seems like anytime we see that the feds do something a little crazy, it seems like here in Florida, we seem to be trying to do this, trying to replicate,
Yeah.
duplicate, even trying to one up
Yeah.
what's going on. What's
You know,
happening?
with this new administration that we see at the federal level, it now appears as if Florida is in a competition between Florida, Georgia, Texas, and the federal government, and who can race to the bottom the fastest. Right?
Mm,
It's like a race to the bottom, and what we're seeing is this extreme agenda play out that does not serve uh, people, that does not serve the communities that these institutions were created to serve. There seems to be an intense focus on the things that don't matter as much. There's an
hmm
old saying that some people just insist on majoring in the minor,
How about
right?
that?
And that is essentially what we have seen. Culture wars meant to divide people because folks care more about what bathroom a person uses, what pronouns a person uses, versus the things that actually matter, right? How can I provide for my family?
How about
How
that?
can I exist? How can I thrive? How can I ensure that I am living a quality life? How can I ensure that our democracy is protected and I
hmm
have access to have a say in the things that happen in my community? Those are the things that ultimately matter, and that is what we should be ensuring that our politicians are focusing on. Equal Ground, we've played a very instrumental role in the legislative process here in the state of Florida.
hmm
Like I said, when we were founded, we were really founded with the mission of what can we do to prepare our community to vote,
Okay.
right? How
Right.
can we get people registered? How can we ensure that they know who's on the ballot? How can they be informed voters? But what we realize is that it's not enough to only prepare people to go and vote if the people that they elect are not creating policies that serve them.
hmm
And so for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been heavily invested in what does it look like to have a seat at the table of policy making because it shapes everything that impacts our lives. And so here in Florida, we just wrapped up our legislative session.
Right.
It was a historic legislative session, not because they did so many great things.
Mm.
It was more so about what they did not do. And that was pass a state budget on time. We saw the Florida legislature go 105 days. And Judge, as you know, we're supposed to only be in session for 60
60.
days.
60.
So here we were, 45 days past when we were constitutionally supposed to wrap up session, all because there was a major disagreement over the state budget.
Mm.
You had some in the leadership of the legislature, which let me put a pause there to say that presently, if you're not aware, Florida's legislature is comprised of is what's known as a supermajority
Yes.
Republican legislature. So what that means is that the Republicans have an advantage in both the Senate and the House by over 66%. So when you talk about who gets to dominate the policy discussion, you can't help but realize that Republicans control that. But despite their control of the House, the Senate, and the governor's mansion, they were fighting amongst themselves on how we were going to potentially eliminate taxes. Some wanted to eliminate property taxes. You had some who wanted to eliminate the sales tax. And this is all happening in the backdrop of them doing things to further attack our democracy, to further harm our environment, to further ignore the reality that people are struggling to keep up with an ever-increasing unaffordable Florida, right? Homeowners insurance is through the roof, right? And so those are the issues.
I just got my statement yesterday.
It's insane. You know, Judge, we're up. When Charlize and I bought our home, our homeowners insurance was $1,500 for the year. We are now over $6,000 that we're paying for our premium here in the state of Florida. That's an issue that I need our legislators to attack, right? I don't care so much about, you know, whether or not we want to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
Isn't
that was
that
legislation
crazy?
that passed this year in Florida, right? Those are the things that they're focused
And
on.
and may I interrupt, but not only that, but then they also passed a budget act, a fiscal act, that would allow, that wants to, it's so funny, I almost can't even get it out, that they want to require all textbooks, all articles, all state documents to also be changed and updated so that it reflects state,
That's right.
Gulf of America.
A very
That's
expensive
crazy.
undertaking. We're actually on a legislative tour right now, and we'll get a chance to talk about that in a second. But someone asked, well, who pays for that? And I said, newsflash, you, the taxpayers of this state, are footing the bill for these tactics and these tricks and these antics, essentially, that we see. And so, you know, this was just really a missed opportunity, as we have seen under this administration, missed opportunity after missed opportunity, using legislative session as an opportunity to grandstand and signal and talk to a base versus actually getting things done for the people that need it the most. And so this was a continuation of that. Like I mentioned earlier, we're on a tour right now. We were very fortunate to have an opportunity to come by Volusia County twice.
Right.
Glad to have you in attendance both times, where we were here in Daytona Beach at the Civic Engagement Center over at Bethune-Cookman, and then we were over in DeLand. Pastor Bradley was fortunate enough to open up his doors at Greater Union, and we had two conversations here in Volusia, but that was an extension of a statewide tour where we've traveled throughout the whole state, talking about the impact of legislative session, what it means for our community, but also as we gear up for what will be a major election in 2026. We know that the governor is terming out of office, and as a consequence of that, there'll be candidates running as Democrats, candidates running as Republicans, and there'll even be some candidates running as independents. And so we'll have a fresh crop of candidates to sort of sift through and determine who best serves the interests of our community. And so we're working in pursuit of that. We have 4 more stops left on our tour, and then all of our attention is pivoting and getting ready for this major election in 2026.
You know, it's again, as we look back and see some of the things that have happened, you mentioned that Florida, Texas, Alabama, Georgia seem to be in a fight. Right now, it seems to be the seesaw seems to be between Florida and Texas, where they're constantly, continually seeing, like you say, how much lower than can we go. We're not talking about the limbo, folks. We're talking about, maybe we should call it the political limbo. Because just even this yesterday, saw that there was a big news article about what's going on in Texas.
Yes, sir.
They're pushing, and there was some talk about the same thing with our governor.
That's right.
Pushing for redistricting. Now, most of you that might not be aware, redistricting normally takes place every 10 years following the general census of the country. And that's when they realign the districts, they realign the congressional districts, they realign state houses and all of the right. And all of these things are set up so that there's consistency. But now they have gotten, as some would say, word from the top, from Trump, that's told some of the folks in Texas that they should go ahead and redraw their district lines after not just, they're talking about 5 years,
Yes.
which would mean now, and which would mean they want to change it so that they can increase the number of Republican legislators going to Congress, which will further strengthen. Right now, what is it, about a 2 to 3 vote? It varies. 2 to 3 vote.
It's very, very tight margins in the House, and this is just an attempt to steal political power and insulate the control of the Republicans in the legislature. But I want to take it a step back here in Florida, because this is a fight that we've been undergoing literally for decades. I mean, every decade there seems to be a fight around redistricting, because so much power is contained within that process. And that's why it's important that we continue to educate our community about the importance of redistricting. But I'll talk about the most recent fight. So in 2020, after we did the census, the state of Florida, just as many other states across the country did, had to redraw their boundaries for their congressional representation, or for their legislative representation, both at the state level and the federal level. Well, the state of Florida underwent this process, but while the legislators were contemplating which map they would vote for, how they would actually separate the districts, our governor inserted himself in the process and literally submitted his own map.
Yeah.
Now, Judge, that's not fair, right? You know that the Constitution says that it is the job of the legislature to create the map. It's the job of the governor to sign it into law. You're not supposed to tell the legislature before they even finish their work, this is what you have to do. And so our legislature, to their credit, defied the governor. Right? These are people who share the same political party as the governor, and despite him saying, I wanted this map, which would have eliminated 2 black congressional seats, they still went forth and put forth a different map. Well, the governor said, I'll show y'all, and he basically vetoed the map that the legislature had approved, and he told them that he wouldn't sign the state budget until they ultimately gave him what it is that he wanted. And so as a consequence, they ended up capitulating. They ended up giving in to him. And the map that was approved eliminated 2 congressional seats that had been drawn to guarantee that they would elect a black candidate.
Okay, you hold that legislative point for a moment, because this is where I get upset at my judiciary brethren, because just literally about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, that the Florida Supreme Court approved the governor's bill.
That's right.
And I couldn't even for the life of me say, wait a minute, does this man, he's consolidated his power, because he appointed 6 out of the 7 justices on the Florida Supreme Court. And therefore, they went, and it was a 6-1 vote.
Yes, sir. And I'm very happy that you went there, Judge. So after this debauchery that happened in 2022, we filed a lawsuit, Equal Ground, alongside the League of Women Voters, Black Voters Matter, organization called Florida Rising, and some individual plaintiffs who live and had their rights taken away. We filed a lawsuit and said, hey, this is unconstitutional. You cannot openly take away black representation. You cannot openly create an advantage for the people in your political party. And so we filed a lawsuit, made it all the way to the court, and that's what Judge is referring to. When a court in a 5-1 ruling, there was one judge who recused himself, Justice Kennedy, because his wife is a legislator. So in a 5-1 ruling, they essentially said that despite the governor eliminating 2 black seats in Congress.
No problem with that, Joe.
Despite the governor giving Republicans an advantage, partisan advantage in our congressional delegation, prior to the governor approving this map, Florida had 27 seats in Congress. 14 of those seats were represented by Republicans. 13 of those seats were represented by Democrats. Now that's parity. Right? That is really reflective of our state. We're about a 50-50 state. Well, when the governor got done with this map, we were not only 2 seats taken away from black voters up in Jacksonville and up in Central Florida, but he also created an advantage of 20-8 for the Republican conference in the legislature. Now, I want to take a moment and, like, on the surface, you just hear, okay, well, it went from 14 to 13 to 20 to 8. What does it matter? Well, you may be familiar with a major piece of legislation that just passed at the federal level.
You would happen to be called
the
big beautiful
ugly bill, as I like to refer to it.
I want to know who calls a piece of legislation the big beautiful bill.
Beautiful bill. Yeah, it's
I
terrible.
mean,
but that bill, Judge, passed the House of Representatives by 4 votes. You talked about the margins, right?
Right.
Had Florida not delivered such an unfair, warped map that gave Republicans an advantage, that legislation would not have passed.
Yeah.
And so you think about the consequences of what happens here in our state.
Right.
And how that now impacts people in California, in Georgia, in Texas, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota. These are people who are now subject to the whims of this legislation. Legislation that calls for deep cuts to Medicaid, over $1 trillion removed from Medicaid. Legislation that calls for almost over $1 billion removed from SNAP benefits, right?
Yeah.
These are now going to be implications that are felt far and wide, all because in 2018,
Ron DeSantis.
Florida elected a guy by the name of Ron DeSantis in the closest gubernatorial election of our history. And then he went on to appoint a Supreme Court that has turned their eyes, turned their backs on not only black voters, but really the Constitution. And Judge, you are a legal scholar. You know that in 2010, voters in Florida approved the Fair District Amendments.
Of course.
Right? These amendments make very clear how the redistricting process should play out. You shouldn't draw maps with favor to incumbency. You shouldn't draw maps in favor of one
Partisan
political
parties.
party.
Yep.
You shouldn't draw maps to do anything other than create districts which voters can go and vote and choose their elected representatives. But what has happened in this state is that these politicians have drawn maps to choose their voters.
Exactly.
And that's not how the
Let's say that again.
process should work.
See, they flipped it.
Yes.
Instead of voters
choosing their politicians, they have now chosen their voters through this redistricting process. And so this is now a continuation. And what we fear is that because of what is happening at the federal level with the current occupant of the White House asking states to go in and just openly gerrymander districts, openly go in. I mean, it used to be a secret, right? It used to be like the biggest elephant in the room. Like everybody knew that it was happening, but they would always deny that they were doing it for partisan reasons. Well, now they've just ripped the Band-Aid off and they're just saying and calling it like they desire. And they're saying, hey, we're openly doing this because we want to create an advantage. And, it's so disheartening because, if they were confident in their policies, if they felt like their policies were really good for the American people, why should you fear losing the House? Why should you fear losing Congress? If you feel like the big ugly bill, is a good piece of legislation, then you would have voters coming out in droves to support you. You don't need to manipulate the redistricting process to try to give yourself an advantage. And so that's what
in the old days they would say that somebody's got their hand on the scale.
Oh, absolutely.
They're pulling the scale down.
Absolutely.
Because they want to take advantage of the people. And yet, at the same time, there are those out there who may be feeling so disenchanted about all of this happening. They may very well say, well, we can't do anything about that. I mean, this governor is as he said earlier, he's on this little coin that they were showing, and you'll probably see it on some of the news feeds where they're talking about him as the commander-in-chief of Florida. And I'm going to tell you from a personal experience, this governor that we got today is not the same governor that came in 2018.
Oh, absolutely.
I saw this man who started off, in my opinion, I mean, the things he was doing then would have made him a populist governor.
Absolutely.
He was doing stuff across the board that was beneficial to the people. But then somewhere along the journey, it went south.
Well, I can tell you what happened. Like I said, he was elected by the closest margin of any governor in the history of this state. And he knew that, right? He knew that he had to come in and lead in a way that would sort of endear him to voters because the election was so close. So he had to appeal to both sides. He had to appeal to the middle. But what happened is the person that he ran against in 2018 was mired in scandal, unfortunately, and none other than Andrew Gillum. And when Andrew Gillum was sort of taken out of the fight, if you will, and he knew that there was no chance that Andrew Gillum would be able to run against him in 2022, it really changed his tune. Because he felt, and he made an accurate assessment, that the Democrats had no other person who could come and give him a challenge in that race. And he was correct. We put up, or the Democratic Party put up Charlie Crist, a former Republican governor, as their person to go against him in 2022, and he spanked him. He beat him by over 1.5 million votes. And so here you have one election where, the margins are thin. Less than 35,000 for a state as large as Florida, the third largest state in the country. And you have the gubernatorial race come down to less than 35,000 votes. And then 4 years later, you win re-election by 1.5 million votes. If you ask me, you would think that that's a mandate, right? You would think that I can come in now, I'm safe, I'm in my final term, I'm untouchable. And so he started, passing these extreme laws. And then we also know that ever since he came on the scene in 2018, that he was auditioning to be president of the United States. He had a desire to have higher political office. And when Donald Trump was mired in scandal after scandal, and it looked like he was either headed to jail or, nowhere near the White House, people started looking at Ron DeSantis as a mini Trump. And he started feeling himself to think, well, hey, if Donald Trump is not in the picture, then I'll have a good chance of, being the guy. And so all of what we've seen in terms of the policies that he pursued, the attack on black people, the denial of history, the banning of books, the refusal to keep our community safe, to prioritize testing in most vulnerable areas, all of that was in a pursuit to signal to the rest of the nation, I'm your conservative hero, I'm your guy, elect me as president. So yes, he definitely shifted, but I think that shift started with his biggest arch nemesis, none other than Andrew Gillum, sort of being sidelined and being taken off the battlefield. And at that point, he knew that the Democrats had not one person who could stand the chance to beat him in a race. And so that's where we really saw the flip. And it's unfortunate, because a lot of people, like you said, were sort of fooled to think, hey, this guy might not be so bad after all. But he ultimately showed his true colors. He appealed to his base, which, ultimately was a race to the bottom. That is what you have to do to be able to win an election as a conservative.
It's sad.
Appeal to the worst of us, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, the effects and the impact of that are still being should I say, they have not been fully affected as of yet. And we're going to see it. When you start talking about people losing their SNAP benefits, and for those of you that may not be aware of what SNAP benefits are, their bottom line is modern day food stamps. Now that means a lot of people are not going to be able to eat. A lot of people are not going to be able to have a roof over their head. He got the current occupant of the White House, as you said, number 47, got upset a couple days ago and fired the chief of the labor Secretary of Labor division that handles the employment statistics.
That's right.
Because he was upset that the most recent statistics for the month of July showed that there was fewer jobs created
than he anticipated.
And all of a sudden that this group of people that starts out, I believe when they start talking about calculating, there's something like 40 people involved with the initial calculation. Then they bring it down to 12. Then they bring literally this person is the one that releases the results. And so now you got he said, they had to, what was the term he used about the results? In other words, they wanted to make him look bad.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
that's crazy.
We've seen a repeated pattern, not only with this person, but with this administration, to say that anything that goes against their viewpoint is fake news. It's not accurate. It's not legitimate, and that's just the mind of a small person, right? To think that their way is the only way. This is his administration. They have no reason to lie or dissuade the numbers, in favor for him or against him. This is just data. But what he fails to ignore, right? His answer to the jobs report is not, maybe it's my policies. Maybe it's the instability of me enacting tariff after tariff,
Yes.
or, threatening this country over that country,
Right.
or, destabilizing the stock market, or, ensuring that people lose access to benefits, right?
It's kinda
These
crazy.
are the things that have led to the numbers being what they are. And instead of him looking inward and within his own administration and his own policies, he
He can do
passes
no
the-
wrong.
Yeah, he can do no wrong.
What's
and
that?
he
The
makes
emperor. What's the old phrase? The emperor wore no clothes.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that tracks, unfortunately, with what we have seen from this administration. That certainly tracks for sure.
Well-
But this redistricting fight, not to necessarily go back into that, but this is very, very important because Texas has already started their process. You may have saw in the news where their state legislators have left the state
Right.
because in the state of Texas. And just like in many legislators, you need quorum, right? If you're
Right.
familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, you know that it takes a certain number of people to even conduct business. And
Right.
once you don't have quorum, you're not able to do official business. Well, the Democrats in Texas, they got slick. They said, well, if we leave,
They
won't
won't
have quorum. And so they've literally have left the state of Texas. And in Texas, apparently there's a rule that says, if you're a legislator and you leave, they could issuing a warrant to have you brought back for the purposes of creating quorum, and now they're also assessing I believe a $500 fine for every day that they're.
I was wondering
not in
if, in
place.
fact, if that is legislation that's
Or
on
if
their
it's-
books
right.
out there, or whether this is just something that the governor of Texas has come up with.
Exactly.
Because I believe he likes to, like the occupant of the White House likes to issue his own executive orders.
right. That's
So
right.
I'm not sure if that's actually Texas law, whether it's Texas executive order.
So-
Because they were saying yesterday in one of the reports that they were not sure that he had the authority to do so.
Well, I know for sure around the arrest and the warrants, they don't hold water outside of Texas.
Right.
And so as long as the legislators remain outside of Texas, there's no way that he can send folks to go round them up and arrest them. And so it remains to be seen. However, I know that those people are doing righteous work.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that you could essentially see a state like Texas, which is already a solid conservative state, even further insulate themselves into the conservative area is just damaging.
Well, we're going to have to take a short pause for the calls here. We've got some, average some commercials, and we're going to take a stretch break too. I'm going to stand up and take the seventh inning stretch as they do in baseball, and we're going to come back with you in just a few minutes. All my Facebook friends out there, hold on. We'll be back in just a few, but just keep it real. Tell some friends, go get a drink of water as well, because it's hot down here in Florida for sure. And we'll come back with you in just a few minutes, okay?
Joy 106.3.
At PC 101 and Tax Right Services, we're here to handle your taxes with expertise. Whether it's this year's taxes or catching up on past years, we've got you covered. Schedule your one-on-one appointment today. Reach us at 386-363-5324. That is 386-363-5324. PC 101 and Tax Right Services, where taxes are done right. With convenient locations in Daytona and Ormond Beach, we make tax time stress-free and simple.
Hey, Volusia County. A free community fish fry will be held on this Saturday, August 9th, from 1 to 5 p.m. at the Chisholm Center, 520 South Clara Avenue in DeLand. There's music and dancing, adult games, kids' activities. Adults come early at 11 a.m. for our membership meeting. It's all free. Sponsored by the Volusia County Democratic Black Caucus. This Saturday, from 1 to 5 p.m. at the Chisholm Center, 520 South Clara Avenue in DeLand. A free community fish fry. Don't miss it.
Attention parents and kids. For the summer, Mount Bethel Baptist Institutional Church is serving up free lunch meals for all kids and teens age 18 and under. Stop by Mount Bethel Baptist Institutional Church Monday through Friday from 12 noon to 1:30 p.m. and enjoy a delicious meal and snacks at no cost. This summer break spot feeding program runs now through Friday, August 8th. Address 700 Dr. M.L.K. Jr. Boulevard, Daytona Beach. Spread the word and bring your friends to Mount Bethel Baptist Institutional Church Summer Break Spot.
Prima Broadcasting, Inc. is a registered 501c3 nonprofit. This means your donations are 100% tax deductible. The support from listeners just like you is what keep this station on the air. Feel free to visit our website, joy1063fm.com, to donate, or call 386-256-4706 for more ways to give. Thank you for your continued support.
Tune in to Daytona Beach Radio with your host, Donna Gray Banks. This is the city's most exciting news and information program. Here on Joy 106.3 FM, every Wednesday beginning at 12 noon. Don't miss it.
Special thanks and support to WAIG comes from R.J. Gaines Funeral Home, where Alexander C. Wynn III, licensed funeral director and owner. R.J. Gaines Funeral Home provides full burial services, entombment, cremation, transporting services, pre-planning arrangements, and consultations. R.J. Gaines Funeral Home is located at 804 Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune Boulevard. R.J. Gaines Funeral Home, 386-253-7686.
All right, and we're back, and we're glad that you all could wait on us here. We're going to continue this conversation. I'm speaking with Mr. Genesis Robinson. As I've stated earlier, he is the Executive Director of Equal Ground. I hope I got the title right. If not, I maybe I'm prophesying.
Yes, that's correct.
Maybe we're looking at Equal Ground nationally,
Yes, yes.
How about that? So all of these efforts we're talking about the political arena, which also affects everything else that we do in this world. I can go back to my political science teaching days where I remember that my political science professor often told us that, of course, politics affects everything.
That's right.
Everything that you do is political. So for those of you that don't want to say you don't want to participate, those of you that may not have voted this past time for whatever your various reasons were, now the impact of that is starting to take effect. And we got a question from one of our callers that came in during the break, which wanted to ask the question of, can I register to vote right now, or do I have to wait until 2026 for the general election to come around? And of course, there's no time like the right time, like right now. Yes, go ahead, register to vote. Take some friends and some family members with you. For those of you that are already registered to vote,